Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A massive day in the markets for both equities and Bitcoin, with some big announcements expected from Trump, Powell, and our good friend Dennis Porter. We're of course going to be covering that in today's video, alongside some exciting news from CleanSpark and Soluna Holdings. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join, and let us know in the comments section below what you make of today's news and your current top pick in the Bitcoin mining space. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okie doke, guys, away we go. Tuesday, September 23rd. This is a big day for macro news in the market, in the Bitcoin space. We're going to be talking about that first up. Then we have some more miner specific news out from CleanSpark and Soluna we wanted to break down for you guys. Before we get into that, though, maybe we'll kick off with Bitcoin price today, making somewhat of a recovery, slightly above 113, but still nowhere near where we would like it to be or where we were just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, maybe it's just holding ground there. I mean, there's expectation we might hear news this week, which might drive Bitcoin price more positively in an upwards direction. But I'm more than happy that it stays in this range. If it goes down further, it's a buying opportunity. My
Yeah, it certainly is. Part of our strategy that we actually divulge in the weekly power play videos is how we're rebalancing our portfolio. And a big focus for both of us is taking some profits from the miners, working that into Bitcoin or IBIT specifically. And again, a great buying opportunity at these levels. So we would encourage you guys to take a look at the power play videos as well, if you'd like a little bit more detail on our specific trades. Now, speaking of the news in sight today, Trump, Powell, and Dennis Porter are on the docket. We just got off the call with Dennis Porter. We'll follow up on that news in a second, but Donald Trump speaking at the United Nations, and Jerome Powell expected to give his first remarks since last week's rate cut as well.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what Jerome Powell says in his first public speech since the central bank's interest rate cut. I mean, there's anticipation that, we might get a couple more cuts before the end of the year to get the economy going in the direction that the president wants it to go in at the moment. And I'm sure there's a few of the larger economies around the world looking very closely at what the US are doing before they start determining what they're going to do in their own countries. But yeah, we'll be interested to see what Jerome Powell says, and also very interested to see what the president says. We know the president's stance on things related to Bitcoin, very, very much more positive than previous administration. But yeah, and then our good friend Dennis Porter just announced a big update.
Yeah, he certainly did. You and I attended the call. The news came out last week that there was going to be a big announcement Tuesday this week in relation to Bitcoin and Bitcoin policy in the United States. A lot of people were expecting this could be related to the strategic Bitcoin reserve. We covered that story extensively at the start of the year. It's really kind of fallen off. We haven't heard a lot about the SBR at a federal level in a few months now. So that was the anticipation. You and I jumped on the call. Wasn't quite a strategic Bitcoin reserve announcement, but fairly significant nonetheless.
Yeah, when you consider the state of California is effectively like a large economy at country scale. I mean, I think if you looked at it in the order of countries by GDP, it probably ranks in the top 5 in the world. And so to become governor of a state that size is important, especially when you're there to deliver policy. And bear in mind, when this happens and you've got a sitting president who also is very bullish on Bitcoin, you have a state whereby you can give support. And even if the governor who's in place at the moment, who's actually giving up his seat as governor, Gavin Newsom, he's going for the presidency at the next election. If this candidate gets in, he can also give him some guidance as to how to deliver the strategic reserve if he's successful getting to power as well. So it's, maybe not what everyone's expecting, but I think it's still a reasonably big update if you look in terms of the size of California and the fact that, it's one of the largest economies in the world.
Yeah, and I will say Ian Calderon, the pro-Bitcoin candidate we're discussing here, he's not only got the backing of Dennis Porter, but he's a long-term Bitcoin OG. He's been in the space actually before Dennis Porter, so he's not new to the table like potentially the Trumps or some of these other politicians. It would be great to get a pro-Democrat Bitcoin representation at that federal or even state level in California. So we'll see how this one progresses. But nonetheless, as Dennis says, you do need support from both sides of the aisle. And the last thing we'd like in the next election cycle is to have any of this Bitcoin work that's been done unraveled by the next administration. The other point we wanted to bring up on Friday, we are expecting the PCE or personal consumption expenditures. This should be a good kind of weather gauge for how the US economy is doing. That could have implications on the rate cuts moving forward as well. So a number of things to keep an eye on at a macro level here. But as you say often, Anthony, everything seems to be moving in the right direction for Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, we'll wait out and see the news of the other two speeches in due course.
Yeah, we certainly will. Now, moving on to the miner specific news, we covered Soluna yesterday, kind of a feature alongside IREN, talking about the extreme interest, support, strength this share price has seen. Interestingly enough, you and I were chatting yesterday about Soluna's current ATM policy. Mentioning it might be a good time to start raising some money. Now, ATMs can be contentious, especially in the Bitcoin mining space. We know a lot of companies last year, like CleanSpark, like IREN, used the ATM to help grow their businesses. On the other side of the coin, though, a lot of retail investors are concerned about dilution.
Yeah, and to be honest, part of me doesn't blame Soluna for putting this update out there. They've announced an ATM up to $87,650,000, which is a significant amount. It's probably higher than their actual market capitalization at the moment. And that's not unusual. We've seen other miners put out significantly large ATMs, which at one point in time were larger than market cap. But bear in mind, the volatility of the Soluna share price in the last week or so has been nothing but, extraordinary. I mean, we've had some great updates in terms of, them coming forward and showing their project list and timeline, which is pretty amazing for a company of the size. They've got two projects on the go at the moment, which is the first time they've ever had to do that before. Previously it was just get one project on the go, finish that project, move on to the next one. But now they've managed to get some additional funding from other sources. I mean, Generate Capital will give them a funding line of about $100 million, and that'll help with the two projects that are ongoing at the moment, which is Dorothy 2 and Project Catty. And so, that will be, getting them on board there. Remember, Project Catty is going to host all those machines from Galaxy in the early part of 2026. That needs to be completed fairly quickly. That's a sizable hosting deal there. So I think today's, is an opportunity. I mean, we were talking not too many weeks ago about the share price being under $1, and the fact that we even asked John about his concerns about the NASDAQ regulations for maintaining a position on the exchange, had to have a share price at $1. But he was more than satisfied with the way they were going, and they had at least a minimum of 6 months, with then potentially a 6 months extension on top of that there to get the share price. Well, literally within a few weeks, the share price this morning in pre-market went over $3, but it's been extremely volatile. It's been moving up and down pretty much like a yo-yo. So this ATM here gives the opportunity to effectively sell some shares up to that $87 million. And that will give them significantly more levers to utilize to get more of these projects ongoing there, because there is a demand out there for power. And if you have the funding in place, then why not get, more projects online quickly to utilize that power and to get revenues coming in over the longer period. So that's part of the bull side. From a negative standpoint, obviously retail shareholders don't like the dilution, because it means that their share of the company becomes less. And if you think about the size that this ATM potentially, it's like there's more shares being issued at today's current price than there are shares allocated at the moment. So that means you could be losing effectively 50%. But if the company can show how they're going to use this money, and they are, have a number of projects ongoing and a number of projects in the conveyor belt. I think this is only positive news. And remember, less than 3 years ago, a certain company called IREN were valued at less than around about $100 million when the share price dropped all the way down to literally $1.03. And today they're valued at over $11 billion less than 3 years later. Now, I'm not suggesting Soluna are going to be valued at $11 billion in 3 years' time, but it just shows you those companies that can utilize the ATM really well, and CleanSpark and the likes of IREN and a few of the other miners have done that really, really well in these last few years to get that momentum, to get that capital coming into the company, to grow hash rate, to grow expansion into their HPC strategies. It's only helped them to grow as a company in terms of market capitalization. And we saw this with CleanSpark in 2023, 2024. And we're now seeing it with IREN in 2024, 2025. Maybe there's another miner out there in 2025, 2026 that's also going to break through. Maybe it's Soluna, who knows, but time will tell.
Yeah, it certainly will. Very reminiscent of what we just saw with Bitfarms as well. They were struggling with that delisting concern under $1. Share price has just rocketed as well. I am of the opinion that this is positive for Soluna. I feel like financing is really the bottleneck right now in getting these projects off the ground. We've talked about that a lot. So if they're able to get some more money in the tank, that's great. For me, whether you own 2% of a $100 company or 1% of a $200 company, it's all relative here, and hopefully that growth continues. Now, you just mentioned CleanSpark used the ATM quite effectively last year. They've now pivoted. They're starting to talk about HPC. We've talked about this on the channel quite extensively as of late, specifically their Atlanta, Georgia sites we're hearing a lot about. Again, financing seems to be the topic of this press release, with CleanSpark now going out, putting some of their Bitcoin HODL to work, and essentially getting a Bitcoin-backed loan to help further their HPC strategy.
Yeah, and this is an increase in that Bitcoin-backed loan credit facility with Coinbase Prime. So they've already got an existing facility in place there. They're increasing that by 100 million. And they've said that they're going to use this to deploy across their portfolio and including high performance compute. So obviously confirming that statement that CleanSpark are now no longer a pure play miner. Should the value to investors be more significant if the return through HPC is greater than Bitcoin mining? I mean, they're still trying to grow to 60 exahash. There's no doubt they'll get to that. HPC, obviously, it's a bigger more capital intensive strategy. We've just covered the likes of IREN yesterday. They spent 674 million buying some additional GPUs to put their capacity up to more than double their capacity now. So that just gives you an example of, if you're going to go into this space and do something, how much will 100 million get you? Not overly too far, but it is a starting point. And if some of that money is deployed into HPC, and we start seeing some reports that some of their sites that we've highlighted on previous podcasts do become more utilized for delivering HPC, then it will give them the starting capital to do that. But this is obviously a more of a short term looking loan, because they can obviously repay the loan back quickly and cease the interest rate. So it'll be an interest rate whilst they're utilizing that facility.
CleanSpark, along with Riot and Mara, have a large Bitcoin HODL that they could draw down if needed, but you're totally right. We've heard anywhere from $8 to $13 million per megawatt just for infrastructure for HPC AI. So the 100 million, essentially just a starting point at this point. But nice to see Matt Schultz and team confirming the HPC. We've heard earlier that they may start allocating their megawatts to other use cases. This is one of the first times they've specifically and clearly stated high performance computing. So share price today, obviously we're responding quite well to that. Speaking of share price, if we move over to the miner market update here, you can see a bit of a split bag. Miners were up substantially this morning. Cipher, IREN, CleanSpark making some big moves. Soluna, again, double-digit mover today. What's catching your eye right now?
Obviously, Soluna's was over $3 this morning. The day range there is showing 296, but I got messages coming through my phone suggesting that the share price had reached in excess of $3. But still at $2.56, that's a 22% rise just on the last 24 hours. So, but you could look at the volume there, 76 million shares. There isn't 76 million shares in Soluna, so obviously a lot of trading going on in that position there. CleanSpark, 5%. That's a nice rally there based on the news we've just delivered there for you. Bit Digital also starting that recovery above $3. Remember, a couple of podcasts ago we were under $3 and we were suggesting, why isn't it showing that valuation of white fiber? Well, this is a help towards getting there. And bear in mind, with the Bitcoin price where it is at the moment, a lot of the miners aren't getting that free run. Mara's having a reasonable day as well. It was over $19 in early trading. And Hive was over $4 in early trading, but a pullback. Cipher, you've already mentioned, they were over $15 in pre trading today. 15, I think $15.30 it reached, and so that's probably one of Mike Alfred's picks there, obviously along with IREN, where he's a director of the company. But it's had a fantastic rally this year, as good as as many of the miners there, and probably only beaten by IREN in terms of share price growth since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, now if we move over to the heat map chart here, you can see the daily moves, the market cap as well, but starting to really look good on the 1 month, the year-to-date change. A few months ago, this table looked almost completely red in those final two columns. That's shifted 180 degrees. Now the miners showing tremendous strength. The HPC re-rate is well underway. And as I've said in many podcasts, Bitcoin still in that holding pattern. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here if and when Bitcoin breaks out.
Yeah, a lot more miners in the green now, and only two miners actually in the red year to date, Bitdeer and DMG. As we said earlier on, the standout couple of miners here, IREN 330% year to date, Cipher 205% year to date. Bitfarms has had a bit of a pullback. It's still 88% year to date and 126% month to date. So over the last month there, 126%. Cipher 113%. So those two stocks really pushing on there, and you now look at the market capitalizations. You have Cipher at $5.5 billion. I mean, go back 6 months ago, I think Mara was $5.5 billion. Cipher is now $5.5 billion. It's ahead of Core Scientific in terms of market capitalization. And interestingly, Core Scientific's the one with actual deal of 590 megawatt deal with CoreWeave. Cipher's yet to announce that. Mara's replaced Riot as a second company, but look at IREN there, $11.5 billion as at the time this was taken, literally just before we started the podcast there. $11.5 billion. That's fairly unprecedented for a Bitcoin miner. And I mean, a Bitcoin miner, where a company where they're actually mining is their predominant business. There are some companies out there like Galaxy who do a small amount of mining with a larger market capitalization. That's based on the fact that they are covering a number of other businesses like an exchange, etc., etc.
Yeah, nice to see these miners recovering. It's quite impressive. We've been covering these stocks for about 4 years now, and really a strong looking basket of companies here if you look across the 12 or 14 names on the list. So again, I'd love to hear any of the Bitcoin mining bears comments on the current situation. Quite active a few months ago. So interesting to see how quickly the tables can turn here. Now, another chart we wanted to get a quick update on, HODL percent market cap. There's been some big moves, as we just alluded to, in the valuation of these companies. There's also been some moves in the price of Bitcoin. I wanted to give you guys an update on the lay of the land.
Yeah, and we've seen two different movements here. We've seen a big movement in the share price for a lot of these mining companies, so the market capitalization are significantly higher. But the price of Bitcoin, as we alluded to at the start of the podcast, that's been coming down. So today, 112, 113,000. It's pulled away from its high of 124,000. Even at the start of last week, it was 118,000. So it's pulled back a little bit. And so those two reasons are why we see Mara, which was generally about 100% It's now only 85.6%. But that can change very quickly. I mean, the price of Bitcoin can go to $120,000, and we'll see that probably have parity then with the, close to what the Bitcoin price is. DMG, again, that was one that was close to 100% as well, very close to where Mara was, and that's 71% there. Again, the reasoning for that there is the market capitalization of DMG has increased, and again the Bitcoin price hasn't moved as much there. And then the rest of them, are obviously not as big an impact on Bitcoin. Bit Digital, if you look at their market capitalization based on their Ethereum, 504 million of Ethereum, and at 48% there. So we talked about the Bit Digital pricing and the market capitalization and their treasury management and the fact they own 70% of Wi-Fi. That still looks to me very, very undervalued, Bryce.
Yeah, as it does to me as well. So, an interesting development, I guess, on the Treasury side of the business here. We just saw yesterday Strive go out and purchase Semler Scientific. So, we talk a lot about the MNAV. This is an example of what can happen if the MNAV's below one. We may start to see some M&A in the space rather than going out and buying Bitcoin or buying Ethereum. You could just go out and buy a treasury company. So essentially saying the MNAV of one should be the floor for both Ethereum and Bitcoin treasuries. Again, time will tell there. Another stock we wanted to give a quick update, CoreWeave. They've been having some strength over the last few sessions as well. If we take a look at your parity table, CoreWeave, Core Scientific, starting to look a bit more optimistic.
Yeah, so we've seen some positive movement on the CoreWeave share price, over $132 today. That gives you an indicative price for Core Scientific of $16.34, but the actual share price of Core Scientific is $17.28. So that's getting a premium there. Still, undervalued in terms of probably by about 20% on the deal there. If you look at the indicative value of that deal, it should be around about the 9 billion mark. It's showing 7.2 billion at the moment. So again, I think shareholders will still wait for more to come. They want more parity towards the $20.40 before they'll agree. Maybe CoreWeave can put something more on the table to get that share price where it needs to be and give shareholders the opportunity whether to keep their shares in Core Scientific or take the 0.1235 CoreWeave shares for every Core Scientific share they hold, and then use that investment in a company like CoreWeave that's going to deliver HPC on a much larger scale for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, a couple different outcomes that could happen there. Ideally, the CoreWeave share price just keeps appreciating. We get closer to that original 2040 or higher. Or like you say, maybe they come back to the table with a bit of a top up. Now, the final slide we wanted to talk about, two numbers that jumped out to me on the page here. Difficulty adjustment, October 1st, not looking good for the miners, and global hash rate continuing to push that upper limit in terms of the 7-day.
Yeah, it looks like potentially another rise in difficulty, 4.6% increase there. That's not going to be great for miners. That means they're losing that amount of production there. Hash price also getting closer to $50 now. That's not great for miners either. We've seen it at $60 in the last month. That's another 20% come down on hash price there. So, we've talked to you before about the halving being impactful to the to revenues for miners. Difficulty is equally a challenge for them. And if you look at the 7-day global network hash rate, nearly now 1100 exahash. It's just shy of 1088 exahash. And, that's a significant increase on a 7-day moving average than we've seen previously. That's the highest 7-day moving average since we started doing these podcasts. And that means that obviously around the world, not necessarily in some of the public miners that we showcase in our podcasts, but around the world, there's more and more machines being added to the network, probably in places where there is stranded energy or very, very cheap energy, and therefore you are still able to get a reasonable rate of return if your energy price, which is the largest cost you'll incur in Bitcoin mining, is negligible or next to zero.
Yeah, you got to think this is starting to be some countries or nation states plugging in this volume of ASICs. You talk about difficulty. The next one on October 1st, 7.8% expected increase on top of the 6.5 you just mentioned in the last difficulty adjustment. So very difficult times for the miners. We've talked about the fact that for pubcos, for a lot of them, this may be the last halving cycle that they publicly mine Bitcoin, and thus moving into HPC AI. So there's a lay of the land from a macro level all the way down to the miners and then the Bitcoin network fundamentals. Let us know how you guys are feeling about the miners in the section below. What do you think in terms of Cipher inking a hyperscaler deal? A lot of speculation around if that could happen this week or not. We'd love to hear your comments. Feel free to tune back in this afternoon. We've got a special with Bitdeer talking about the SealMiner A3 launch. Jeff LaBerge will be on the program, a double header for you. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here soon.